I know that it can be really fun to jump straight into those details, but in this video, I'm going to give you some warnings about why it's better to work in passes. If you've been drawing long, I'm sure you've experienced this at least once. You're drawing a while, you're getting really into your image, and then all of a sudden, it's just not working. In fact, you might not have even noticed when it stopped working. So in cases like that, sometimes you have to start over. Well, working in a production environment, like a video game studio, it's important to not get off track and to waste time like that. So the best way that I've found to avoid this issue is to work in passes. Go from simple to complex. So you can be fast at first, and then as things get more and more solidified, you can then begin to work on the details. But you wouldn't rush to those details too quick. So number one is just my basic form. And this is what the basic rendering for Photoshop talks all about. So if you haven't seen that, check it out, it's in the store. At number two, I've already established the major form, so I get into more specific, color and a little bit of texture. And then in number three, I have the finished image. And in this way, I can carefully work on those little tiny details at the very end, after I've established that I liked the rest of the image, working through 1 and 2. Over the next few videos, I'm going to show you how to apply this sort of materialing to the base object through two different approaches. First, I'll be doing hand painting. And now hand painting is good because it's the most versatile. If you're painting stylistically, you can work in your own style flawlessly. You don't have to look for photos that are low detail and match your cartoony style. Also, it allows you to be specific about where you put the details. If you really want to enhance those focal points and not distract the viewer, you can choose to put all of the details in critical areas. Now, photo texturing, on the other hand, it's a great way to infuse realism quickly. Especially if you have a big library of photographs to work from, a few overlays can make your image look photorealistic. And this is important when you're making games or concept art for movies, because you have to work on a tight deadline. So I think it's important to know both, and maybe over the course of this video, you'll find one process that works best for you. So as I said before, the first half of the process is the basic rendering. This is just the form. So I've gone ahead and included this in the resources directory in the zip file. So you'll notice the way this scene is set up is I have one layer inside a group, which is the base rendering. And then if I make other layers inside that group, they're all masked, so I can't paint outside the lines. So for instance, with this multiply layer, I can only paint on the crate itself, leaving the background intact. So hopefully this will be helpful for you when you go to apply the material. And if you need to learn more about how I made this mask, go to controlpaint.com, and there's lots of videos on the subject. Next, I'm going to quickly show you how to make sure you overlay photos correctly, because I'm not going to go over it too carefully in the actual process. So let's take a look at photo overlaying and distorting for proper perspective. If you look at the photo overlay on A and on B, you might notice that one of them looks a little bit wrong. Well, that's because in A, I didn't take into account the perspective of the plane that I was overlaying it onto. I just laid it straight flat on top. In B, I did distort it to match the perspective. So the result is B looks much more naturalistic, whereas A looks flat and strange. So let's take a look at how I did this, because this is going to be done a lot, especially in the photo overlay material. So you're going to need to know how to do it. On the left, I've got my blank material ready to be overlaid, and on the right, I've got my materials. So I'll start with the same one from the example, and I'll put it in the proper place, and I'll change it to the multiply blending mode. So right now, I'm ignoring the perspective, and that's not what I want to do. But I want to do free transform, right click, and then distort. And now I can move these corners around and put them into proper perspective. So I'll just match the corners up. See what a difference that makes? Now the checkerboard recedes into space, as it properly should with perspective. Well, let's try it with the next one where I don't have the obvious checkerboard overlaid. So I'll grab this one with the vertical striping. If I were to simply multiply this now, it might not actually look so bad. but it's still important, even with things like this, to put them in the proper perspective. So free transform, distort, and then match that perspective. And you see here, I can actually go outside of the borders if I want to, just as long as I'm matching the right perspective. So I could have it go way up on top. And then using a lasso or a mask, trim out the excess later. So what I've just done there is quite simple. The distort tool takes only a few seconds to do, but it makes a world of a difference when you're doing photo overlays. Before you go on to actually do an illustration, you might want to give this a try. So if you take a look in the Resources folder in the included zip file, you'll find this empty file ready to be tried out. So find your own photo images on the internet, some texture files, and overlay them yourself. Remember, free transform, distort. It really works wonders.